Hi, I'm Matt Cahow. Welcome to the channel. I'm going to do a continuation of the analysis I did in the previous video on this chorale BWV 269. I finished the first half last time. Here's the second half of the chorale. It's, what, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 measures in total. So I'm going to get through the second half. From the previous video, we are in G major. The very first chord here is a 1 chord, G, B, D, and you've got G in the bass, also G in the alto voice there. The B and the D are in the soprano and tenor. And then on the second beat, we still have the same chord, so that's still a 1 chord. This F sharp here is going to be a passing tone because it's going from the G to the next beat here in this first complete full measure. On the second beat of this measure, we have an A in the bass, and it looks like an A minor chord, A, C, E. So that's going to be a 2 chord in the key of G. And the F sharp here is going to be another passing tone because on the third beat, what do we have? Well, we have another G chord, G, B, D. We have a B here in the bass, so that means the chord's going to be in first inversion. So our Roman numeral is going to be 1, 6. And this F sharp here, or F sharp, excuse me, A, the A here is going to be a lower neighbor tone because it's stepping down from the B and then up here again to another B. And then on the first beat of this measure, that's a G chord. That's a 1 chord still, okay? Also still in first inversion, so still 1, 6. And then we get some 8th note stuff happening. So this is, let's see, it's a little tricky here. We've got this overlapping stuff. So on the second beat, what can we do? Well, the B in the bass is ringing through, okay? So we also have a D here and then a G on top here. So we could label this still as a 1 chord. The D on top here is also ringing through, so that's the 5th of the chord, so that's okay. This note here that I'm circling, the A, that's going to be a neighbor tone. It's neighboring the chord tones. G steps up to A and back down to G. And this C here, that's going to be a passing tone. Let me blow this up, it's a little bigger so we can see it. Okay, good. And then what happens here into the next beat? Well, on the third beat, that's a 1 chord in root position. This A here, this can be a passing tone. It's coming from the B, stepping down, and then to the G, okay? And yeah, that's fine. Then here, this F sharp, that's going to be a lower neighbor tone. And the C here also can be a passing tone. And I think that covers the analysis. So the whole big old measure here, that's a 1 chord, but we just have these voices weaving with the running 8th notes, but it's still a 1 chord. And then here at the fermata, I think I did this last time, this looks like a 5 chord, D, F sharp, and A. We've got D's in the bass and tenor voice, then F sharp, the 3rd of the chord, and the A, the 5th of the chord there in the soprano, so that's okay. And then here on this third beat, what do we have? We've got E, B, E, and G. Well, that's an E minor chord. And so in the key of G, that's going to be a 6 chord, okay? E's in the bass, so that's going to be in root position. All right, so we have 1, 5 at the fermata and then a 6 chord. And then let's go to the next line here. Okay, we have the E carrying over, it's tied, and it's still a 6 chord, still in root position. On the second beat here, what is that? D, G, and then on top we have another B. So this is a 1 chord here. Okay, and we've got a D in the bass, so that's going to be in second inversion. So the Roman numeral for that, or the figured bass symbol, is 6/4. Okay, for second inversion, the reason why is because you get a 6th and a 4th when you have a second inversion chord. And let's see. Yeah, the F sharp here, that is going to be a passing tone. And yeah, it's going to be a passing tone. We get the chord tone here on the and of the second beat, so that's okay. And then here on the third beat, what is that? That's a 2 chord. That's an A minor chord. So C in the bass, that's in first inversion. So that's going to be 2, 6. And then on the first beat of this next measure, we've got B in the bass, D, A, and then D. So what do we have here? B, A, D. How do I want to analyze that? That could be a B minor chord, but we're missing the F sharp. B, D. Not sure how I want to analyze that. Okay, I guess here's what I want to do. I do want to call this a one chord. Here's why. So one chord would be a GBD thing, okay? We don't have a G here on the first beat, but we do have one here, right? So this A is hanging over, and it's actually suspending the chord here on the first beat. So this A here is functioning as a suspension. It's a 2-1 suspension, okay? Because the A is functioning as 2 above the G. So this is going to be a suspended chord here, or this note at least. This A is acting as a suspension, and this is a 1 chord, and it's going to be in first inversion because the B's in the bass. So this 1-6 with the suspension in there. And then on the third beat, what do we get? We get a D, D, C. Okay, this whole thing here certainly looks like a 5 chord. And we've got, and it's a 5-7 because we do have the C here on top. This C here, you could label it as the 7th of the chord, and that would put it in third inversion. You could also just say it's a passing tone. I think either way would be fine, okay? And then the F sharp here, yeah, that's part of the chord. So, and then we've got 5 there at the end of the measure, and then what do we do here? We go to 1. So this here is a 1 chord, GBD. The A here is going to be a passing tone. And then on the second beat, how could we analyze this? Notice that the soprano and alto voice are hanging over, right? So this is still a 1 chord. It's just right in this moment here. We could say, oh, okay, we've got the chord in first inversion, but then on the third beat, it steps down to another G. So if we're going to label this third beat as still a 1 chord, that would work. But this is F natural here. We're in the key of G, but we get an F natural, which normally don't have. So we have to analyze this chord here, not just as a 1 chord. This is actually the F natural turns this into a dominant chord, okay? It's a G7 chord right here, all right, which doesn't belong in the key of G. It belongs in the key of C. So this chord here, because look what we have G, we have F natural, and then over on top here, we've got the B hanging over from the dotted half note, right? So we've got a GBD and then the D here in the tenor voice. This is also hanging over here, so we get the D here. So this is actually functioning as a G7 chord, right? That's what we get, okay? G7 chord is a 5 chord in the key of C, so this is 5 of 4. That's what this chord is, 5 of the 4 chord in the key of G, all right? Secondary dominance is what that's called. And then what we expect here is if we've got a G7 here, which is 5 of C, it better go to a C chord. That's almost most, and at least in this music, this is what's going to happen. And that's what we get here. We get C in the bass, octave C, E and G on top. So this is a 4 chord here. So we get 5 of 4 going to 4, okay? That's how typically Bach would handle something like this. On the third beat of this measure, we get back to 1, GBD. And then on the next beat, we have an F in the bass, a D on top, A, and then D on top. Well, F sharp in the bass, excuse me, key signature. So this is a 5 chord, and it's in first inversion because the F sharp's functioning as the third of the chord. So this is 5-6, okay? The C stepping down, this is going to be a passing tone here. And then on the second beat, it looks like we're back to a G chord, so this is a 1 chord, and we have a similar suspension thing happening with this note A. This note's ringing through. This is functioning as the second of a G chord. It's 2, right, and it's stepping down to 1 on the G there. So what we have here is a suspension with this note A. The D is hanging over here. That's functioning as the 5th of the chord, so that's okay. And then right here on the third beat, yeah, this is really getting sloppy. Hope you guys can read this. On the third beat here, what is that? That is Yeah, that's a 5/7 chord, okay? And what do we have? Well, we have A, we have C sharp, F sharp, and then C. With this 5/7 chord, we don't actually have the root of the chord, but still, we can deal with that. Should we call it something else? F sharp, C, F sharp, oh, excuse me, not C sharp, C natural. F sharp, A, C. Can we just call it a 7 chord? I guess we can just call it a diminished chord here. Let's do this. Let's get rid of. I think it would probably be better here because we don't actually have a D. Let's call that a 7 chord. So this is a diminished 7 chord. And the A is in the bass, so that would put this chord in first inversion. So Roman numeral 7 diminished, and then 6 for first inversion. And then a 7 chord, leading tone chord, it usually is going to go to tonic, and it does here. That's a GBD thing happening, so that's okay. B is in the bass, but actually it does drop down to the G here, so we can just label that as a 1 chord on the first 2 beats. That seems most straightforward. And then on the 3rd beat, what do we get? We get a 5 chord. D, F sharp, and A. D is in the bass, so it's in root position. The C here we could label as either a passing tone, or we could say it's the 7th of the chord, and we could call it a 5/7 thing. So either one would work. I think that's fine. All right, and then we're getting to the end here. Let's see. All right, we've got a moving line here in the bass voice. I'm gonna guess that most of these are gonna be passing tones, and then on the macro beats, on the big beats, we're gonna get chord tones. We'll see what happens here. We've got in the bass here on the first beat, we've got E, B, G on top. Okay, so that's some kind of E minor. It's an E minor chord here. So that's a 6 chord in the key of G. E in the bass means it's in root position, and this F sharp that's hanging over. This is another one of these suspensions here. The F sharp's functioning as a suspension. It's resolving to the root of the chord E. Okay, and then the D here, yeah, we could label that as a passing tone in the bass. And then on the 2nd beat, we get, what is that? That's a 4 chord. C, E, G thing happening. And let's see, the G hangs over here. So there's still a G ringing. So you got to pay attention to that. Like you've got the dotted quarter note at the beginning right here in the soprano voice. That's hanging over into the 2nd beat. So you got to count that as part of the chord, okay? Because it's still making sound, okay? And then what can we do here? I think we can label all of these notes here on the end of the 2nd beat. We can just call those all passing tones. We could put a chord in there. That would be it'd be a B minor thing happening there. But because it happens so quickly and it's obvious that the notes are driving towards the 3rd beat, I think all of these notes here can be just passing tones. Okay, and then on the 3rd beat, what do we get? G, B on the top, alto is G, D in the tenor voice, and then on the bottom here, oh, okay, we get an A. All right, interesting right here. All right, so I think I want to analyze. This is a little tricky because right here in the bass, okay, so let me justify my analysis here. On the 3rd beat here, that's a G chord. Good, but how do we deal with this A? Okay, we just came, if we analyze this one as a passing tone, having a 2nd passing tone is a little weird, okay? But the G here at the end of the measure, yeah, I think we can justify that. I can say, okay, here's a passing tone here. This B on the end of the 2nd beat, maybe we can say very quickly we get this B minor chord happening, and then it goes to 1, and then the A in the bass is functioning as a passing tone, and then it finally gets a chord tone here on the end of the 3rd beat. I don't know. That's a tricky spot right here in terms of analysis. Like, what do you do with that? But I think that's one option as to how to analyze that. All right, and then not surprisingly, we get a fermata here. So usually we get a dominant tonic thing at cadential points. And what do we have here? We have a 5 chord, D, F sharp, and A. And yeah, it's in root position, so no surprise there. All right, we're getting to the end here. Let's see, on the third beat of this measure here, what is that? That's a 1 chord. And then on the first beat of the next measure, what do we have here? That's, well, let's see. I think probably we want to call this a 5 chord. But we do have a G in the bass, right? So if we say it's a 5 chord, then this G in the bass, notice it's coming also from the same note, G. So this is going to be another one of these suspensions, and it would be a 4-3 suspension because we get the third of the chord here, the F sharp. And also because the third of the chord is the lowest sounding note, that's going to put this chord in first inversion. So this is a 5-6 chord, and this G here, let me clean this up again. Okay, this G in the bass on the first beat of this measure, that's going to function as a suspension. And it would be a 4-3 suspension. Hope that makes sense. And then on the last beat here, that's a subdominant chord. It's a 4 chord. C, E, G. Yeah. And then this F sharp here is going to be a lower neighbor tone because it's going down from the G and then back up to a G, another presumably a chord tone. And then on the first beat here, what do we have? We have, yeah, it looks like we could call that another E minor chord, so that's a 6 chord. Okay. The D here, it could be the 7th of the chord. It also could just be a passing tone. Since we've been analyzing most of these 8th notes as passing tones, I think it's good to be consistent in that. And then on the second beat, we have C, A, and then a G hanging over here from the previous measure or previous beat. So what do we have here? C, A, G. Okay, that's an A minor 7 chord, which is okay. So that's a 2. A minor would be a 2 chord in the key of G, and it's a 7. So the C's in the bass, so that means this chord's in first inversion. So a 7 chord in first inversion, the figured bass symbol for that is 6, 5, because you get a 6 and a 5th when you look at the intervals from the bass up. And then finally on the third beat, that is a 5 chord here, and it's a 7 chord. I think we could analyze this C as a 7th, so 5-7 chord. And the A on top, it's ringing through, and that functions as the 5th of the chord, and that's okay. And then finally, lo and behold, we get in the key of G, the last chord of the piece, we get a big old G chord. We've got a G in the bass, then the B, the soprano's doubling the root, and then we get the 5th of the chord here, D, in the alto voice. So no surprise there in terms of the final cadence point. So that's it for the video. I hope that makes sense. Feel free to leave me a comment or a question. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and I'll see you next time.